National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, the president was Reagan, okay, at the time when it happened. Who were the people? The senator was Orrin Hatch, Republican out of Utah. Ted Kennedy was involved out of Massachusetts. Senator Paula Hawkins was involved out of Florida. And then you had a couple other people that were involved. What was the idea to say that this is actually a good thing to pass? Who convinced these guys we should do this to protect who? Are we trying to protect the folks that are making a vaccine, or we're trying to protect the individuals that are getting injured by the vaccine?
So, denial is a very strong, a tool. They convinced themselves, and Hatch was a pretty pro-pharma. Hatch was a pro-pharma senator. Kennedy was a pro-pharma senator. These guys, talked a good game, but they were on pharma's payroll to that extent. I'm sure people on both sides of the aisle are going to say, oh, not Hatch, not Kennedy. But it's true, they did a lot of work for pharma. And they justified it in their head this way. By giving a break to the pharmaceutical companies so they don't get sued into oblivion by every smart lawyer who comes down the pike, we're going to allow them to do things that will really help children in the long run, because we're going to protect children in this country from getting illnesses and diseases you get in other countries. And boy, I'll tell you, you as you well know, you can't get out of the hospital after giving birth here without getting a vaccine given to a child that's just a day old. It's pretty hard to do.
I just looked up the following. I said, how much money, Rob, can you ask this question? How much money did Hatch and Ted Kennedy raise from Big Pharma? Okay, let me give you Hatch's first name. Hatch's first name was Orrin, O-R-R-I-N. O-R-R-I-N. When you pull this up, here's what you'll notice. It says to me that Hatch got, from Open Secrets, it says roughly $2.871 million.
At a time when $2.87 million meant a lot. And,
wow,
but wait a minute.
Look at that.
Wait, but hold on. PBD, this is great. That's just the direct money from pharma companies. Now, what does pharma do? They set up advocacy groups for people who are afflicted by health problems. So if they want to get a small drug approved as an orphan drug, what they call an orphan drug, for these small genetic diseases that afflict only a small patient population, they're really terrible diseases, Huntington's disease and other things. But pharma will find a few of the people who are suffering from that. They'll give them the funding and the organization often to become an advocacy group. Those advocacy groups will also contribute to the politicians, and they aren't counted as drug money. So that too, I guarantee you that if we were able to go down the list, and if I went back through all of what I call the associated pharma enterprises and front companies and everything else, that 2.7's 3.5 or 4, but 2.7 is direct drug money.
So how do you get ahead of this? Can Trump and Kennedy and Maha and those guys come out and reverse what happened in 1986 with the Childhood Vaccine Act? They have a lot on their plate, and the question is, where do they want to spend their political capital? What do you want to do? I think about this often back when Obama was president. When Obama was out of office and the people were crazy for abortion rights on the left and all that, they said, oh, we need a national abortion bill, right? I would say to people, well, why didn't Obama pass that when he had the presidency and had the House and the Senate? They said, oh, because he was busy on health care. You have to prioritize. I get it. You can't do everything on your wish list. Sure. So same here with Trump and Kennedy. They can't do everything on their wish list. They haven't yet stopped direct-to-consumer advertising for TV. Maybe that's coming. They put a limit on it. They are, and when I say they, Trump, but particularly Kennedy, I know from talking to pharma people behind the scenes, and I love this, they are sweating. They couldn't stand that he was going to come in office. They were hoping that Trump would put him into some position in the cabinet that had nothing to do with health. And then when he comes to HHS, they didn't know what to make of it. And they're sort of holding on with white-knuckle fingers on their tabletops, thinking they've got a countdown. You know how you've never been in jail, I've never been in jail, but if we are and we have a sentence and we're knocking off the time on the wall of how many days left. We did that in the military boot camp.
3 years you had, okay. Yeah. I remember that story when your mother said you wouldn't fight. We left Iran so you didn't have to go in the military, and you're in the military now. What's the matter with you? They're waiting for Kennedy to get out. But let me tell you, this administration has the ability to make fundamental changes to the pharma machinery. It's not going to be nirvana. It's not going to be a panacea, but they can make changes. Then if the American public sees that that is to their benefit, and they're going to see it to the benefit in one way. How? Paying lower prices. That's how the public judges it. If they can go and get a medication that was costing them $300 a month and it costs $120 a month or $130 a month, guess what? Most of them aren't shareholders. They aren't people holding the public companies to every quarter to come up with a better profit. So that's how they see it. And I think that this administration can deliver big time on a lot of fronts.
Yeah, I think this would be big. But, so two things I take away from this. Even if we prevent Big Pharma from advertising on TV, if the drug is addictive, it's going to get to the people anyways. And once you get them addicted once or twice, they're always going to come back. They don't need a commercial to keep coming back to you. So you got to get them hooked on a product, and they'll be back customers.
Well, and so what happened? What did OxyContin create? So OxyContin, because of the crackdown on all the legal analgesics, pushed the market for the illegal market. That's one of the reasons fentanyl has now led to, fentanyl is the #1 cause of death in the United States. Guess what? So you're taking OxyContin, you're addicted to Oxy. Purdue, by the way, what are they working on? Well, they were a one-hit drug. You used to have one-hit wonders for record bands. They were a one-hit company. That was it. It put them on the Forbes wealthiest families list. In 2014, they entered with $14 billion. And it was
this is who, Sackler family?
The Sackler family. And Forbes called them the Oxy Clan at that point. They went from nothing to $14 billion based on one drug. They were looking at another drug which would have helped you if you were constipated, because one of the side effects of being on opioids is you get constipated. So I love how pharma companies find that there's a side effect from the drug they've given you, and then they look to make money on the drug to treat it in a different way. But when OxyContin gets dried up, guess what users who are addicted say? They say, God, I'm paying $20 for that pill. Or I'm having to go to a doctor and go through a hassle. I have to go to CVS or Walgreens, and they're looking at me like I'm a drug addict. I can buy fentanyl pills that are 50 times as strong on the street for a few dollars. So it pushed it into a much more dangerous market. And that's why I think we saw the increase initially in 21-22 during the pandemic in the number of overdose deaths.
This is it, the OxyContin clan you're talking about, a $14 billion newcomer to the Forbes.
And let me tell you, you know this because you're a very successful guy. You've created an empire. It's tough to be off that list and come on at 14 billion. That's a big enter.
Sudden.
You didn't go from 2 billion and then your stock value went up and all of a sudden, and remember, there's something else about this. We are accustomed to seeing mind-boggling numbers, Musk, 500 billion, whatever else. But guess what? As you know, they're all share prices for the most part.
Right.
These guys had a private company. They weren't public. So Purdue was family owned. The board was controlled by the Sackler family. When they're worth $14 billion, it's a real $14 billion. It's not because they have an inflated price at some point of an IPO.
Got it. Yeah. So, Rob, can you go a little bit lower just to see what happens here? Zoom in a little bit. The richest newcomer to the family, Sackler family, which owns Stanford. United-based Purdue Pharma flew under the radar when Forbes launched its initial list of wealthiest families in 2014. But this year, they cracked the top 20, edging out storied family like Bush, Mellons, and Rockefellers. How did the Sacklers build the 16th largest fortune in the country? The short answer is making the most popular and controversial opioid in 21st century, OxyContin. Purdue, 100% owned by, it's 100% owned by them?
Yeah.
Has generated estimated sales of more than $35 billion since releasing its time-release, supposedly addiction-proof version of the painkiller oxycodone back in 1995. Its annual revenue are about $3 billion, still mostly from OxyContin. The Sacklers still own separate drug companies to sell Asia, Latin America. Wow. Look at these guys.
So what they did, by the way, which is very interesting, they did not use their money to go off and buy a 500-foot yacht. They weren't competing with Larry Ellison to see if they had a bigger yacht than the Saudis or whatever else. They didn't go out and buy a big villa in the south of France for $20 million and go all the time to Monaco with them. They bought their names and prestige on the Guggenheim and on the Tate and on the Serpentine Museum and on the Tufts Medical School. They put their names on buildings at the National Gallery, at the Metropolitan Museum. They were building monuments to themselves, the modern-day pyramids. The Sackler was everywhere. So they made a lot. They gave a lot away, and they still kept plenty. And even when they eventually had to contribute to a settlement, the company goes bankrupt, and the Sackler family, they go to the judge and they say, hey, by the way, this is a fantastic deal. Think about this, PBD. So you have a company. It's injured all these people. It goes bankrupt. You've made billions and billions of dollars.
Okay.
And you have thousands of suits against you by all these people who are saying you ran the company and you over-marketed.
Sure.
So you go before the bankruptcy court and you say, guess what? I'm not bankrupt. I've got a lot of money. But I'd like you, the bankruptcy court, to discharge all of the suits against me, to make them all go away. And the bankruptcy court says, well, you got to contribute some money. So the Sackler said, okay, we'll give like $2 billion. Then they said, we'll give like $3 billion. And then people wanted more. And so they put in 5, and then they put in $6 billion. They eventually contributed over $6 billion as a family, almost coming up to 7, to get rid of all the litigation against them. So now they have a get out of jail free card. Instead of $14 billion, maybe they're left as a family with $5 or $6 billion. But they didn't lose the country club memberships. They didn't lose all of that. They kept a lot of money, and they still emerged with a get out of jail free card. So for the Sacklers, not the greatest outcome, but not the worst by a long shot.
Yeah, they went from being communist to now, becoming some of the richest families. They bought a property, a $30 million property, is selling this $30 million property. I don't know which one this is. From the $30 million property they're selling. Can you look this up, Rob? They're selling their $30 million property. I'm trying to see where it's located at. Oh, it's in Boca Raton.
Well, because where does everybody come who has legal problems in another state? From New York or wherever else, they come right to Florida. You homestead. Put as much money as you can into your homestead, right? Make sure that nobody can touch that. Yep. And that's the safest thing. So it makes sense that that's the case. But, you said before, you were talking about, and I know this like a left turn detour, but sometimes the Sacklers made all the money, the brothers, and then I never heard them talking about communism anymore. And they weren't talking about overthrowing the government or whatever else. But then sometimes you look at these people like Ma'am Dammy, running for the mayor of New York, comes from a wealthy family. Guess what? He's not coming from dirt poor family or that. He's like a champagne socialist. So there are those people who have some money who still think that the idea is good to redistribute wealth. Now, maybe if he makes $1 billion, he'll change his mind.
Yeah.
But
well, it's always exciting to redistribute other people's money, just not your own money, right? People are excited about doing it with others.
That is absolutely true.
I can't find out where this area is. I don't think it's in Boca, but it's one of the properties that they have.
Hi, I'm Gerald Posner. I'm an investigative reporter. I've written 13 books about everything from chasing Nazi war criminals to the heroin trade to 9/11 to Saudis to fundamentalists and to the drug industry and to money inside the Vatican. You can ask me just about everything on my next. Reach out to me and talk to me about 9/11, find out what's happening in terms of the Epstein files. If you want to find out what's happened in the recent Trump assassination attempt by crooks, I'm looking into that as well. I've got a whole series of things, including the transgender industry on children, that are on my hot list, so send me some questions.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.